Hope and Grace. Can a podcast really make a difference outside of just the people listening? I mean, Hope and Grace is all about self-improvement, but can that actually lead to something bigger?
It's easy to feel lost if you don't have support.
We know things are crazy, but here's how we deal with it and come out stronger.
Welcome to the
Hope and Grace podcast.
Today, we're going to get into a concept that I think for most people is defined in a purely legal sense. Consequences.
Right.
When we talk about the bad things that happen when you turn away from guidance, the gut reaction is to think of punishment, some penalty that's handed down from on high.
And that is exactly the frame that the source material we looked at wants to break. Our whole mission today is to move past that legalistic view and really pull out the nuggets of knowledge about why these things happen.
The mechanics of it.
Exactly. The document doesn't frame these negative outcomes as like divine payback. It's much more predictable. It calls them the natural result of being spiritually and morally out of alignment.
So if we're following the logic here, it's less about policing and more about physics.
That's a great way to put it.
If you step off a solid foundation, the disorder, confusion, and unnecessary hardship that follows isn't something put on you. You've just walked right into it.
That is the core thesis. Think of it like a perfectly designed machine, a finely tuned clock or something. If you drop a piece of sand in the gears, the clock breaking isn't the clock punishing the sand.
It's just what happens.
It's just the mechanical outcome. The effects we're talking about are what happens when you disconnect from a structure that's inherently built for human flourishing and stability.
Okay, let's unpack that foundational premise because it's a huge distinction. If the system is sort of rigged for alignment, what makes that alignment so critical? What's the design we're stepping away from?
So the documents really hammer this point home. The consequences pop up because God's design for life is built around three core things: harmony, alignment, and spiritual wisdom.
And these aren't just nice ideas.
No, not at all. They're described as functional, almost like governing principles. So if human experience is built like this orderly system, then disobedience is basically just choosing to ignore the operating manual.
When people read these texts, I think they really struggle with the idea that an all-powerful being wouldn't just impose a punishment. Why is the source so insistent that this is a natural result?
Because it completely changes the dynamic, right?
No.
It changes the relationship between the person and the outcome. If it were a punishment, it might feel arbitrary, or maybe you could get lucky and avoid it.
You could talk your way out of it.
Maybe, yeah. But because the document frames it as the natural result of disconnecting from the source that sustains, directs, and empowers, it puts all the responsibility back on the choice.
Meaning the problem isn't something attacking you from the outside, it's a loss of connection on the inside. You lose the power and direction you need to succeed just by the act of separating.
Exactly. You've bypassed the power source and the blueprint. So this isn't just about a moral slip-up. It's about being existentially inefficient. You're trying to build a really complex life without plugging into the power or even reading the instructions.
That distinction, internal failure versus external penalty, is a really powerful place to start. So let's get practical. When we look at the historical patterns in the source material, what's the first, most obvious external problem that shows up when people get out of alignment?
Well, the first pattern that's consistently detailed is the disruption of the flow of protection and provision.
Okay.
This is the immediate real-world effect on your daily life. It's the sudden arrival of material instability.
And how does that actually look? Is it like a switch being flipped, or is it more of a slow burn, an erosion of your safety nets?
It's usually described as a gradual, self-accelerating erosion. I mean, think about it. The instructions that were ignored weren't just abstract moral rules. They were practical guides for living a sustainable life.
Like how to manage your resources, how to do business.
Exactly. How to maintain social bonds. So when people choose their own way over divine instruction, they just naturally walk down paths that are inherently unstable or harmful.
So stability doesn't just vanish. The choice to ignore the map actively puts you in the minefield.
Precisely. If the wisdom tells you how to plant your fields to avoid a famine and you ignore it, the famine isn't a penalty. It's just what happens when you abandon this successful method. The protection, whether it's physical safety or financial stability, is lifted because the person has voluntarily stepped outside the safe zone.
Okay, so the external world starts to crumble. You lose that provision. That's practical, you can see it. But what I'm interested in is how that external pressure affects our internal state. Does the source material talk about the mental, the emotional fallout of this?
Oh, absolutely. It gives it a lot of attention. And it's the second major pattern. People who ignore divine instruction almost always find themselves wrestling with emotional strain, uncertainty, and a loss of inner peace.
Well, that seems intuitive, right? If your life is falling apart on the outside, you're going to feel it on the inside. But is there something more direct going on? Does the misalignment itself create internal chaos separate from the external problems? But we'll get into that after a quick break.
Okay, I can't wait.
Finding balance.
Balance.
More like inner calm, I guess.
Yeah.
It's about finding that sense of peace within yourself, even when everything around you feels chaotic.
It might just be the key to unlocking your next level of growth.
So before the break, we were talking about external problems.
Yes, and that's the key. That's where this idea of a stabilizing force comes into play. Divine principles are described as more than just rules. They're like a cognitive architecture.
An operating system for your mind.
That's a perfect analogy. It's a perfectly optimized operating system for the human psyche. When you move away from that clear, pre-installed structure, the mind is just left wide open to confusion and impulsive decisions.
So the confusion isn't just an emotional reaction to bad circumstances. It's what happens when you throw away the map for your own mind. You're left trying to solve problems with no reliable framework, which has to be exhausting.
Totally. Spiritual wisdom is like a filter. It helps you clearly see the difference between a good path and a destructive one. Without that filter, every choice, every emotion, it all just carries the same unstable weight. Peace comes from internal order. When you give that order up, uncertainty just rushes in to fill the space.
That makes the internal consequence feel so personal, so immediate. Now, if we scale that up, we go from one person's internal chaos to a whole group of people. What happens when impulsive decisions and emotional strain become the norm for a community?
That leads us straight into the third pattern, the breakdown of relational and communal harmony. According to this framework, disobedience is never really a solo act. Its effects always ripple outward.
I can only imagine it gets worse exponentially. If you have a community full of people who lack inner peace and are just driven by confusion, trust has to be the first thing to go.
It is, without a doubt. The source material is very clear that when individuals or whole communities act outside of this guidance, the result is predictable. Division, mistrust, and conflict follow.
Because the common ground is gone.
The common ground that you need for cooperation and support is just.
Yeah.
It's been eliminated. People start operating out of self-preservation, out of impulse, and that makes them inherently unreliable to each other.
It sounds like these foundational principles, this alignment, is literally the glue holding society together. And when it dissolves, everything just fractures.
It acts as an accelerator for hardship. The individual chaos spills out into the public square, and that creates what the text calls further layers of difficulty. For example, if a community abandons honesty, a principle of alignment, commerce just falls apart. If forgiveness is abandoned, small grudges can become, open warfare.
The whole community's ability to function is crippled.
It is, because the basic principles for constructive interaction are just gone. The societal cost is just a multiplication of all the individual suffering.
Which brings us to the long-term cost, which always feels like the most tragic part of these sources. The loss of what could have been, the loss of potential. If this pattern continues, what is the ultimate consequence for our purpose, for our growth?
That's the fourth and final adverse effect. It's the distancing from the wisdom that leads to growth, elevation, and purpose. It's about restricting your future self. It's not just about losing what you have, it's about never becoming what you were designed to be.
That's a profound idea. So what's the mechanism there? Growth is actually impossible without alignment? Or is it just that the process becomes so inefficient, you basically stagnate?
It's the latter. The process becomes incredibly inefficient. The source really highlights this duality. God's instructions are designed to help people flourish, to reach their highest potential, or what the text calls elevation.
Okay.
So when those instructions are ignored, the opportunities for transformation, guidance, and progress become limited. It's like trying to drive a Formula One car without ever looking at the maintenance schedule or using the right kind of fuel. You might move a little bit, but you are never ever going to reach its intended speed or longevity.
So disobedience restricts what could have been freely gained through alignment and surrender. The opportunity cost is massive because the progress that should come easily through wisdom is now blocked by your own self-will.
It's the highest cost of all. because it affects your destiny. The growth isn't taken away from you arbitrarily. You're just operating outside the environment that was optimized for your success.
Yeah.
All the tools you needed, the clarity, the community support, the protection, they've all been dismantled by the first three effects.
Right. By rejecting the structure for elevation, you're basically putting a ceiling on your own life.
You are.
Taken all together, this whole framework it's incredibly clarifying. The consequence is not some random penalty. It's the mechanical, unavoidable cost of walking away from the very tools and blueprints you need to build a successful life for yourself and for your community.
It's a total system failure, and it's caused by unplugging from the very source that powers the system. And, despite this whole deep dive into hardship and failure, the final takeaway isn't about fear. It's about restoration.
An invitation.
It's an invitation, exactly. It presents all this knowledge not as a final judgment, but as an open invitation.
To come back and re-engage with the blueprint.
Precisely. It's an invitation to return to alignment, restore order, and walk again in the peace and clarity that come from embracing divine direction. The knowledge of what goes wrong is actually a very clear map. It shows you that the negative outcomes are just signals, telling you exactly where you're misaligned and guiding you back toward a flourishing life.
That completely flips the motivation, doesn't it? It's not about trying to dodge a punishment. It's about recognizing that the bad stuff is just instability, a sign you're on the wrong road for where you want to go.
And it's a profound call to understand that the greatest ease, the greatest progress, the greatest safety, according to this framework, it all comes from surrendering your own, often chaotic and unstable, choices to a reliable, stabilizing structure.
That concept of surrender, especially when it's mentioned in the context of gaining progress, is so provocative, especially in a culture like ours that values self-reliance and independence almost above all else. We see surrender as a loss of power.
Yet within this framework, insisting on your own path outside of alignment is the only sure path to limitation.
So the final thought we want to leave you with is really to think about that paradox. If resistance guarantees restriction, and we understand that hardship is just the natural result of stepping outside the structure designed for success, how might that very act of surrender, that return to alignment, paradoxically be the fastest, most direct route to achieving maximum personal freedom and elevated growth? It suggests that maybe true freedom isn't the absence of direction, but the embrace of the right direction. A profound thought for you to mull over as you think about the structures that guide your own life.
Let the light of truth reach as many open hearts as possible. Like, share, and subscribe to help spread God's word. Your comments are always welcome. Stay guided and uplifted by God. Be blessed.
We are hope.